So naturally, I was thinking I would be coming home for Christmas. But instead, I was coming to a new house, a new environment. I mean, it wasn't even our same Christmas tree that was put up that I was used to. So there was a lot that was different for me when I came home for Christmas that first year.
From the Family Life Podcast Network, this is Family Life Blended. I'm Ron Deal. This donor-supported podcast brings together timeless wisdom and practical help and hope to blended families and those who love them. Welcome to episode number 45, entitled Adult Stepfamilies, Joys and Challenges with the Holidays. Well, Christmas is here. Do you remember your first blended family Christmas? How did that go? A few years ago, I had an opportunity to interview a couple and two of their adult children as part of the Family Life Today radio broadcast about their first Christmas as an adult stepfamily. You know, when the children are adults, when the couple got together. You're going to learn how that first Christmas went for this family. Spoiler alert, not so good. And you're going to hear how they are improving things over time. I must say, I really am excited about this episode because beginning with this episode periodically, we're going to be sharing with you many of the conversations that originally took place on the Family Life Today national radio broadcast. That is the flagship program for Family Life. We're calling them Family Life Today Flashbacks. Through the years, I've been on that program dozens of times, and we've had some great and timeless conversations that are, I think, helpful for blended families. So that's why I'm excited that we're going to be sharing them with you. Okay, the first voices you'll hear are those of Bob Lepine and Dennis Rainey, the hosts of the program at that time. I was a guest. They will introduce me and then the other guests on the show. We're going to be talking about some of the holiday challenges of adult stepfamilies. And remember, you're going to hear from the adult children. The conversation was insightful and revealing. So here is our first Family Life Today flashback on Family Life Blended.
Joining us in the studio is Ron Deal. He is the director of Blended Family Ministries here at Family Life, is a prolific author, has written a book. In fact, Ron, explain to our listeners what Life in a Blender is all about. It's subtitled, Living in a Stepfamily, A Guide for Kids.
Well, first of all, it's great to be back on the broadcast with both of you. Life in a Blender, Living in a Stepfamily is a booklet designed for children, easy-to-read booklet for kids ages 10 and up. And it comes with a free parent discussion guide. The idea is get your kid thinking about a few things that they're probably feeling, put some words on it, and then give parents an opportunity to interact with their child around that and create dialogue that lets both of them understand each other better and move forward as a family.
Well, you've got more than 25 years experience in this area. Marriages and families that are blended really do have some challenges around the holiday season. And we decided to get up close and personal and bring into the studio Bob and Vicki Maday, all the way from Jonesboro, Georgia, down near Atlanta. Bob and Vicki, welcome to Family Life Today.
Thank you. We're happy to be here.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
We also brought Bob's daughter, Katie, and Vicki's daughter, Jonelle, into the studio.
And this is where all of the airbrushing goes away, because we want
the truth.
That's right. The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about some of the challenges that go along with blendeds, especially during the holidays. And Ron, you've talked to a lot of blended couples over the years.
Right.
Holiday seasons are stressful, aren't they?
They are. I mean, they're stressful for all families in some form or fashion. Right there, along with the joys of the season, are the stresses of making it all happen and work. We all all know that and understand that. But anybody who's listening right now who's ever had any sort of significant loss, I'm not just talking about divorce, but death of a parent, a friend, any sort of significant loss, you know that the holidays come with mixed emotions. It just does that. You can't experience a happy moment without also feeling the sadness of somebody who's not there with you. And when you sit down and you engage in traditions that you may have done for years as a family, it also brings up the fact that somebody's not there or life is not as you would want it to be. And that's one of the common experiences for adults and children in blended families. You may be able to fake it the rest of the year, but when the holidays roll around and you're sitting down and engaging in a tradition you've done for years as a family, but your dad's not there, it's hard to fake it. If you're engaging in a tradition that other people have brought to the table, your step-siblings, your step-parent has brought to the table, and you don't get that tradition, doesn't make any sense to you, then you really can't fake it. And so oftentimes for blended families, the holidays kind of resurges stress.
Well, and Bob and Vicki, I need to mention at this point, because I failed to earlier, both of your spouses died, and then you remarried not long after your spouses died, correct?
Yeah, it was not long for me, but it was a little longer for her.
So take us to your first Christmas, your first holiday season. Was it all smooth sailing? Was it just as you expected, or were you guys really prepared for that first Christmas together?
Oh, we were totally unprepared for the challenges that we were going to be facing that first Christmas. The first thing we did was we had our children address us and say, we do not want to be one big combined family. We want to keep our Christmases separate, which we also felt was important. So we planned a Christmas with my children and then planned a separate time with Bob's children.
Now, the two of you were the common element in both of those, but you didn't make the siblings kind of learn how to mash it up together, right?
Absolutely.
Jonelle, let me ask you, as one of the kids in this situation, that first Christmas when here's your mom and here's her new husband, and the years of growing up and doing Christmas with your mom and your dad's not here anymore, and here's this new guy, and you're still not sure what you think about him, and it's Christmas, and how did that feel?
Well, it was a little different for me than the other siblings because I lived out of state. So naturally, I was thinking I would be coming home for Christmas. But instead, I was coming to a new house, a new environment. I mean, it wasn't even our same Christmas tree that was put up that I was used to. So there was a lot that was different for me when I came home for Christmas that first year.
So, Janelle, you thought you might be going home for Christmas, but really quickly discovered that it didn't feel like home at all. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Yeah, and so where does that take you? I mean, how do you begin to try to get your mind and your heart around that? Because obviously you care deeply about your mother, and you, for her well-being or for her sake, for your siblings, you kind of want to be there and experience Christmas together, but yet the climate doesn't feel like home.
Well, Bob and I had only met a few times before that Christmas. So, I didn't want him to think that just my reservations were what I was feeling toward him. So that Christmas, I know I spent a lot of time trying to, engage with him, make him feel like I loved him, and, just sort of fought my battle behind closed doors kind of thing.
I so appreciate Jonelle sharing that, Dennis, because essentially what she's pointing out is that there's a mixed bag of emotions. On the one hand, she's wanting to engage the family. She's wanting to engage her new stepdad, Bob. Mom's married this guy. She's wanting to get to know him and experience a relationship with him. And then at the same time, there's this inner turmoil going on, and she is pulling away and feeling like she's got to deal with it on her own. And that just kind of brings to the surface how complicated the holidays can be for families. Essentially, the commentary here is that they are trying to become family. That's really what's happening those early years of the blended family experience. They're trying to figure out how to be family with one another. And there's newness on every corner. And so getting to that place where it does feel comfortable is really a journey that takes many years, I would think.
And I want to ask you, Bob, Did you have some high expectations about that first Christmas with Vicky's family?
I really did, and it's pretty interesting. We had taken some lead as we were getting counseled in our remarriage that we would try to start some new traditions, and we made every effort to make new things sort of happen in our new family. And the interesting thing that happened is when it came to Christmas, that tradition sort of superseded anything else that we had expected. It's not like Valentine's Day where you can just change the location and change the type of cookie or candy or cake that you use. We were put under pressure by my children to hold the tradition in place. And it was quite interesting.
Yeah, well, when they came to us and said that they wanted to maybe change things up a little bit, do things a little bit differently, I just said no. For 30 years of my life, I've had Christmas Eve at my dad's house, and I will be there Christmas Eve with my family every year until. And I just felt like for my children, I wanted them to see the traditions that I grew up with, and how lucky for them to have Gigi here to make this wonderful Christmas Eve happen. It's magical. And they've added some new things, and we have started some new traditions, but our old tradition of Christmas Eve is still intact.
Ron, as Katie's talking about this, I'm thinking back to when Marianne and I first got married, and we tried to figure out how we blended her traditions of growing up the way her family did it with my tradition, how our family did it. And, it took a little adjusting.
Yep.
There's a degree of difficulty that's added here.
That's right. There were
That's
two of you.
significant. Yeah.
There were two of you when you and Marianne were trying to do it.
And we were a little more flexible.
Yeah. and highly motivated towards finding what will make one another happy. And that's part of what's happening with some step families is the adults are more motivated than sometimes the kids are. And so the adults kind of assume that the kids will join them in the motivation. Bob and Vicki had wonderful intentions. Let's do some new things. And in their mind, that's part of becoming family. Let's find the us.
Let me interrupt just a minute, Ron, because our issue, which I think that we didn't face, was we had a fracture within the children. We had some who no longer wanted to have Christmas on Christmas Eve. So the fracture there was among Bob's children.
Okay.
And we were just agreeable to make any changes to Christmas we needed to make. I stepped back and said, Bob, you need to make those decisions with your kids if you're going to change Christmas completely, what it used to look like getting together on Christmas Eve. That's when Katie came to me and said, we're going to keep this tradition. We've always been with Dad on Christmas Eve, and we want to continue to be with Dad on Christmas Eve. And that now is going to include you. And I want my children with Big Daddy and Gigi on Christmas Eve. So the fracture there wasn't between the parents and the kids as much as it was a fracture between the kids. Some wanted to maintain the family tradition that the Madays had always had, and another family member wanted to do away with everything.
And Ron, just listening to Vicki talk about this, I can see how a blended family coming together with all the expectations, the excitement of, we're going to begin our lives together could really get ambushed by these differing opinions and expectations of their own children.
Well, I'm just sitting here thinking, what if Jonelle had stepped into the mix and said, no, we get Christmas Eve. Katie should have, she gets something else. We get Christmas. What do you do if you've got your family and his family and they both want the same thing?
So let's talk about a couple of principles, because there is no one answer. What do you do? All right. One of the principles is flexibility. First of all, as is evident in Bob and Vicki's heart, their intention was to find the win-win, something that works for the kids, and they're willing to be adaptable, and let's just do whatever it is that they need to do so that this holiday can be a season of joy for them. And yet, even then, with that attitude, it got complex because they had differences of opinion about what that would look like, even among the children. So flexibility says, boy, we may not be able to figure this one out so that everybody wins. We do have to talk to all the parties involved. In this case, all the kids are adults. And so it's easier to have that conversation than with families that have younger kids and a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old sometimes don't even know how to verbalize what they want. But we're going to try to talk to as many people as we can and get out in front of this. That's one of my other principles, is be proactive about the holidays. You can't wait to the last minute and then throw it together and expect good things necessarily.
So if you haven't had a conversation yet for this Christmas, you're probably a little behind the 8 ball on this one.
Yeah, it might be a little late, but start now,
Yeah.
So we've talked about 2 principles so far. Be proactive, plan. And number 2, be flexible. Even with the plan, you still might have to go with the flow. But here's another principle I would give those who are listening today, and that's compartmentalize. This is not a fix-all. Again, when people say, what do we do in this case when there's differences of opinions between siblings, between step-parents, step-kids, different sides of the family, what they're really asking is, how do we make this perfect for everyone? Okay, and I want to just be frank and honest and candid and say, you can't. You can't do that every time. That's a function of your family growing together over time and finding the fit. And many times that takes years, okay? In the meantime, while you're trying to find what that answer looks like, compartmentalize. That's the idea that it's okay for some family members to get together the week before Christmas and open gifts, because the kids are going to be with you that weekend and not the weekend of Christmas. Or you get together after Christmas and do something special, or a parent spends time with their biological children and the step-parent says, you know what, you guys got the afternoon and I'm staying out of that, so you can honor your tradition that you've had for 30 years together as a family. All of those kinds of examples are compartmentalizing the different relationships within the home. That feels weird to adults because they feel like that's a failure sometimes. They feel like, wow, because we're not all together, we're not all blended, that somehow we failed. And I say, no, that's not true. What we're doing is we're just acknowledging that today you're not blended, and we're not going to force everybody into a love relationship on our time. We're going to allow them to find a love relationship on their own time.
Bob, I'm curious, as you look back on that first blended Christmas together, did you get through the season and think what used to be a season of joy is now a season of kind of depressing? I'm just imagining that you'd get to the end of Christmas and just go, that was miserable. I don't want to do that again.
Yes, we did get through it, but there was a high level of stress. And even right now, as we're approaching this Christmas, we can begin to feel the stress begin to grow.
You guys aren't blended yet? You don't have this
No,
thing
we're
fixed?
not. No. We're struggling along. Dennis had mentioned earlier about kind of an ambush at Christmas. And let me just tell you an interesting thing that happened to us on our first Christmas. I had retained some gifts that I was going to give to Vicki, special gifts, and I had retained those to open when we had Christmas with Jonelle and Stacy. She had retained a couple of precious gifts that she was giving to me because we were in love with each other, or are in love with each other, and she was retaining those gifts to be opened in front of my children. So when we had Christmas with my children, out came these gifts, and Vicki gave them to me, and they were precious, and they were really meaningful for me, and it was a wonderful gift. Got no reaction from my children. Zero. The air just got let out of the room. Likewise, the next morning when we were sharing Christmas with Vicki's children, same thing. I brought a couple of wonderful gifts out, presented them to Vicki, had lots of enthusiasm about it, and looked up, and the air had been let out of the room again. Jonelle was blank. Stacy was blank. We got sort of ambushed right there. And actually, as a result of that, we now share our Christmas privately, even do a getaway sometimes a week or so before, kind of keep our coupleness out of our familyness.
One of the things that I love about this family and what they're sharing with us today is that they're being real, and they're sharing that it's a process to become family to one another. And in the beginning, Bob and Vicki's expectations about how the kids would react to their special time was not satisfied. And they found a different way to get through that at this point in their life. And that's what I love about them, is they're still finding their way. Not only them, but the kids and the grandkids. And that's what healthy step families do. They don't quit on the process. They stay after it.
And they need coaching because
Amen.
It's a very complex family structure, and it takes coaching to plan, and to kind of take the urgency out of it. Say, we will be a family. We're going to have a family this year, this first Christmas. It has to happen now. And what I hear them saying and you saying, Ron, is it takes time, and it takes a long time for these two families to perhaps come together. And maybe they'll never come together as we imagine it in our minds.
Hey, this is Ron Deal. I just wanted to jump in here real quick on this radio broadcast flashback. If you can relate to any of the challenges that you've heard from this family so far, and maybe you're feeling a little anxious about your home, hang on for part 2. No, not everything is going to get resolved, but you will see growth and progress. Let's continue with the conversation.
Vicki, you were married for how many years before your husband passed away?
We were married 24 years.
And how many kids?
2 daughters.
And then, Bob, you were married for how long before your wife passed?
I was married 34 years, and we had 3 children.
And then the two of you met, Bob, how long after your wife had passed?
I met Vicki about 45 days after my wife had passed, and then we were married a few months later.
So 45 days after the loss of your spouse, you meet, and then a couple months later, you're married?
That's correct.
Ron, if you were counseling a couple who were in their circumstance,
Hey,
and
trust
they said,
me, I tried to over the lunch we had together.
You did, Dennis.
I did.
what would you have said to them back then,
Well,
5-6 years ago?
In the book, Dating and the Single Parent, I talk about this. And, generally speaking, we would advise people to wait a lot longer than 45 days before jumping into another relationship. But here's the thing that I've learned. There's always an exception to every rule. And timing matters not only for you, but for your kids. It matters in terms of your well-being and your ability to grieve the loss and not let that be something that pushes you into another relationship. It helps your kids if there's been an amount of time that allows them to grieve and, the family kind of restabilizes. But there's always rule breakers. And so sometimes common sense.
I was trying to figure out whether you're going to call them exceptional or rule breakers. And maybe
I just called them both.
They're exceptional rule breakers.
I would just call Bob Maday smitten and keep moving. Katie, you're Bob's daughter, obviously, and we're talking about how these blended families, which are so complex, so many issues surrounding these two families coming together. You actually expressed how you were disappointed in some of your expectations around that first Christmas, the differences in how you celebrate. Would you share that with our listening audience?
Well, yeah, when Dad met Vicki and we met her and they started moving forward with their relationship, never guessed that we would have such stress around the holidays of what we were going to do and who was going to be there and were her kids going to be there. And it was very, very stressful. We wanted to keep the traditions the same. And I just remember praying, just, Lord, give me wisdom and maturity with my dad and Vicki. And when things got really, really rough, and I didn't feel like I could talk to my dad because I didn't know Vicki that well, one of my mentors looked at me and she said, "Do you love your dad? Do you trust your dad? Then love him and trust him." And that helped me move forward with the differences. Disappointed with my siblings and how they acted, still am, but extremely excited. And I look forward to the holidays with Vicki. She does an amazing job at our house.
Katie, I asked your dad how he felt when he got to the end of that first Christmas and it was all over and he looked back and it was kind of yucky. Did you feel like the first Christmas was kind of yucky too?
It definitely had a black cloud over it. Missing Mom, seeing Dad with a new woman. I had small children, and wanted it to be a joyous time and thinking my mom's missing this and doesn't get to see her grandchildren. So yeah, there was a little dark cloud, but again, I can't express enough what an amazing job Vicki does. And she loves those grandchildren, and she makes it so extremely special. And she's added new traditions that my kids look forward to every year.
Jonelle, let me turn the tables to you, because we've talked about how Bob and Vicki and Katie felt after that first Christmas. What's your memory of the holiday season being over, and you looked back and you thought that was okay or that was lousy, or what'd you think?
Christmas at my house was always magical because it's my mom's favorite holiday. You know, she blows it out. Me and my sister always had separate sides of the house. We knew exactly where our stuff was going to be laid out, you know, when we walked into the living room. And, you know, when we showed up for Christmas that first Sunday, we did not know where to sit. You know, we didn't know which packages, you know, might have been ours. We didn't know who was supposed to stand up and hand out the gifts. And it was just a lot of guessing and just kind of sitting there looking at one another and not participating in a way that we probably would have in our old home and the way we always did things. So I just remember receiving gifts and packing them in the car and standing there just kind of looking at one another saying, all right, what are we supposed to do now? Because, you know, the thing that took over the white space in the room where no conversations were going on is over. So now what do we do from this point?
You obviously felt like a foreigner in an unknown land.
Oh, yes.
It was unknown territory for you. So give us some perspective. Has anything changed?
Oh, yes. You know, we have a fun time on Christmas. You know, that first Christmas, I think we got him a gift card and we didn't even know exactly where to get it, you know, from. But now we're saying, okay, give me specific things that you want for Christmas, because I want him to have this big smile on his face when he sees that I've come up with something that he's really wanted, you know, and it's not just, oh, I just ran to Kroger on my way here and picked up a gift card for you. Plus, we have 3 grandchildren joining our Christmas. My sister has 3 boys, and so that's fun because we get to see Bob engage with them, and a lot of the excitement is around them as well. So they've brought a lot of laughter and joy to our Christmas that was missing that first Christmas.
Okay, I've got a question for Bob and Vicki, and you can both answer it, or one of you can take a stab at it. If you had one thing to say to adult children who are moving into a blended family as you begin to move toward the holidays, what's one coaching tip or one thought you'd want to make sure adult children hear and think about as they move toward the holidays?
The initial thing that I would say probably is that ask the adult children to extend grace. They will eventually get there. Jonelle and Katie are prime examples of early adopters that had faith. They extended grace to the relationship. They trusted me, trusted Vicki, trusted our love, trusted the Lord, and we're moving to a much better spot. The process works. One of the things Vicki and I have always believed, and that we put front and center in our family, I believe that a healthy marriage draws everything to it, including children, including friends, including people that you lose during a remarriage. Focusing on a healthy marriage brings all things together. It'll come to it. So my counsel to adult children would be extend grace and time.
I love that advice. He's right on. You know, one of the things that's going on there is adult children, teenagers, you know, even older kids, if they could make that choice to embrace their new expanded family, then it really makes everything easier for everybody. The difficulty is when adults, parents, try to force kids to do that. The kids have to do it on their own time. But let's turn the question to the daughters now, Jonelle and Katie. What advice would you give to remarried parents who are bringing their children, no matter what their age, into a new step family? What advice would you give them about how to manage the holidays?
Well, I have two things. I would say go slower, because everything from starting with meeting each other and getting married, from that point, is like a roller coaster for the children, because they are moving at a high pace and we are not ready or equipped to keep up with them. And I know this sounds a little bad sometimes, but have lower expectations. Because if you lower your expectations and they exceed that, then you'll, chalk that up as a successful day.
I just remember that first Christmas, and if we could have just focused on the positive and who was there and who's making strides to make the relationships and keep the relationships, rather than focusing on the negative of so-and-so's not here, it wouldn't have been such a dark cloud that day. And to also just talk to your kids, talk to your grown-up kids, because like you said, they can articulate what they want and what they want to change and what they don't want to change.
There was a lot of wisdom in what those two young women had to say, essentially encouraging parents to focus on what they do have rather than focusing on what they don't have as a family. And then tie into those old relationships. I really believe that biological parents fall into the trap more often than they should of neglecting their own children for the sake of trying to build relationship with the step siblings or stepchildren. And that's understandable because you're trying to reach across this gap and build a relationship. But don't forget to stay close with your own kids. Keep that line of communication open. Listen to them, hear them, and don't be afraid of their negative emotions. Kids will have mixed feelings. They will be confused about the new family and happy about it all at the same time. They will feel disloyal to a parent who has died or a parent that is in another home, and at the same time, they're still trying to connect. Don't force them or expect them to feel certain things to make you feel good. You've got to meet them where they are.
Vicki, I'm just curious, as you think ahead, how will this Christmas be different than the first Christmas was? What are you doing differently? What have you learned over the years? What would you do differently if you could go back and redo that first Christmas? How's this going to be a different year?
We love our kids more than anything. And Bob and I, although we were praying constantly and asking for the Lord's wisdom, we were just so self-centered in our coupleness. And we could not even see what was going on with our kids. And sitting here, listening to Jonelle express that and listening to Katie, I just wish we could go back and have a do-over. In the years to come, we do like to focus on fun. We do something called Santa's Antics, and it's where we have little competitions and games. I guess we're more sentimental now. We're actually feeling those true feelings of love for one another. Those grandchildren are my grandchildren. And Katie is like a daughter. We're just beginning to feel that. We're in our 5th year. We're beginning to feel those more loving feelings toward one another. Only God could open our hearts for that. And that's making the Christmas time more anticipated, more exciting for us all, I think. And I'm getting a lot more feedback from them on, are we going to do this for Christmas? And a lot more input and a lot more participation.
Bob and Dennis, what Vicki is sharing is something that families listening, couples listening right now need to hear. And that is, you may have regrets. You may have, I wish we could go back and do it over. But you can't. You're in process. And there's hope in that. I mean, listen to their stories as parents and adult children are talking today. They're sharing this perspective that, wow, in the beginning, we didn't know what to do. I felt like a stranger in this home, didn't feel like home. I was a foreigner. We wanted to handle it this way, but we learned that backfired. And then year 2, and then year 3, and now they're talking about traditions that people are looking forward to. They're talking about how kids and grandkids are kind of solidifying everybody together as a family. Do you hear what's happening? They are becoming family to one another. And that's an important message for step families. You're not just born a family on the day of the wedding. You become a family as you walk it out over time. And the holidays, as a mixed bag as they are of emotions and happiness and sadness, it's one of those ways you become family. You develop traditions, and eventually there's tremendous rewards.
I'm going to ask Katie to address Vicki, and I want to ask Jonelle to address Bob. And I'd just like you to express a small tribute verbally to both of them for their heroic love for one another and for your family.
Whoa. What do you think they're going to say? You've been listening to a Family Life Today flashback on the Family Life Blended podcast. I'm Ron Deal. If you're like me, you're wondering how those adult daughters are going to reply to Dennis' question. Candidly, behind the scenes, none of us knew what they were going to say or how this moment would go. We'll hear their answers in a minute, but when you listen to it, keep in mind the same question asked to one of their siblings might get a completely different answer. Each person in a blended family has their own journey, and that has to be respected. Likewise, each person must, in turn, respect the journey of others in the family. Adult stepfamilies really bring this out because adult children have their needs, their wants, their opinions, their agendas for their family and for their parent. And when those wants clash with the wants of the parent, conflict erupts. So finding mutual respect for one another isn't always easy, but it is one of the mechanisms you want to seek out in order to preserve your relationship and then grow it through the transition to a new home. I got to tell you, we've got a number of articles dealing with adult stepfamilies at FamilyLife.com/blended, articles on money, dating, the holidays. But one that we're going to link to in the show notes is simply called Second Half Stepfamilies. It has a number of practical tips for both the couple and the adult children. In other words, you can share this article with parent or child and both read it. Check it out in the show notes, Second Half Stepfamilies. If you'd like more information about the Family Life Today radio broadcast and podcast, or the Madays, you'll find it in our show notes. Or you can just check it out at the Family Life Blended podcast page at FamilyLife.com/blended podcast. Hey, if you've got a minute, would you rate us, write a review? And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, you'll find us. And now you can listen on YouTube if you'd rather. Okay, let's get back to Dennis' question. Let's hear from Katie and Jonelle as they talk to their step-parents, Vicki and Bob.
Well, I guess Vicki probably already knows this because we do have such a close relationship. But right after her and Dad got married, I went through some personal stuff, and she was there for me in a motherly way and a friend way. She talks to me like a mother. She calls me out like a mother. She loves me like a mother, and she is one of my best friends. The way that she loves my children warms my heart. I'm so lucky that my kids have a Gigi and a Big Daddy. The things that she does for us behind the scenes, if you knew this woman, she's always thinking of somebody else. And I just love her, and I'm so grateful that you make my dad so happy. And you were sent to us from God, and I'm just so grateful.
Jonelle, your turn.
Well, I think Bob and I have a great relationship, but we're still working on that father-daughter relationship. Just like Katie said, I love the way he looks at my mom, the way she's on the forefront of his brain, with every idea and every decision. Their marriage is just such an inspiration to my marriage. And I can go to them and just how much wisdom they can give me just from their marriage and the things that they've technically have been able to redo in this marriage. You know, I asked my mom a couple of weeks ago, I said, if you and Bob met as your first marriage, do you think you would have the same marriage you would have now? You know, because in my heart, I feel like they're able to take and learn from their past marriages to make this one a wonderful inspiration to all the other marriages in our families, in our churches, and in our communities. So thanks, Bob, for loving Mommy the way you do, and you can just see it in his eyes when he looks at her. So I really thank you for that.
Well, I don't know about you, but I don't think this episode would be complete without an update. 5 years after this original interview, I joined Michelle Hill, host of the broadcast Family Life This Week, to interview the Maday family. We wondered how things were going for them now.
Now, Katie, throughout that next year or the years afterwards, what did you see as expectations on Christmas in your life and also in Bob and Vicki's life?
That first Christmas felt very formal and put together. It was kind of in the years after that, you know, they kind of just released a little bit of that. It was stress-free. It's been more comfortable. And as we've gotten closer to Vicki, it's wonderful going over there now. And it's Gigi and Big Daddy's house, you know, is where we go for Christmas Eve. So I think, you know, we've lowered our expectations too, and that's the best way to do it, is to have none at all and just go. And like Vicki said, we really want to focus on what the meaning of Christmas is. It's not about who gets what and what she's getting and why didn't I get that. And it's just about celebrating the birth of Jesus and getting the family together and the cousins together. And that's just what we strive for now.
Ron, just as I'm listening, I'm wondering, how do we reset our expectations? After we've had a hard Christmas like the Madays talked about and just shared about that journey on that first Christmas, how do we reset our expectations?
Well, I think they've demonstrated pretty well the big chunks of what has to happen. First thing you do is process. What just happened to us? Where did that go? What was going on inside me? What was going on with us? And as husband and wife, there's a central relationship there that you have to repair and process, and then you begin to branch out. And talking to children, inviting them into the process, learning from them. I think one of the things couples need to remember, whether they're kids or adults, as in this situation, or younger, shut up and listen. They have emotions and experience that they want to share. And if you're just telling, you're still in the orchestration mode. Lowering your expectations and listening and saying, hear the contrast. The first year, Bob and Vicki were orchestrating something. They had a vision. They were trying to make it all come together. That's well-intended. It didn't work. Now go into the mode of listening and letting other people co-create how you're going to move forward. This is especially true the older children are. Like teenagers and adults, they need to have some say into what's going on. They value certain traditions from the past. They want to hold on to certain things. They need to speak into it. So let them. Listen, co-create together, and each year you get a little closer to what works for your family and what feels comfortable for the family. And now you're evolving as a family unit.
You know, just as we're talking here, Jonelle, I can't even imagine what this first Christmas was like for you coming home. And it wasn't home. And now that you've celebrated many Christmases in this home, do you look at Bob now as a father figure or as your dad?
Oh, definitely as a father figure. Yes, he's been there through thick and thin with me through even my marriage and infertility, different things like that. So he's been a big encourager to my life.
Would you have thought that 13 years down the road from that Christmas that you spent in that house that was not your home, that you would have been saying that about him?
I think so, because I tried really hard to give him a good chance, you know, and be respectful. And, you know, I didn't harvest any negative feelings toward him in my heart, even from the beginning. It was just sort of, they were moving a lot faster than we were in accepting things, and so I was just maybe a little behind them.
Mm-hmm.
Michelle, that's a good word for any child who's listening of any age. Give them a chance. Give your step-parent a chance. You might discover there's something there that's a real gift. They are not replacing your parent.
Right.
You're not moving anybody out of your heart and putting somebody else in that place. That's not happening. You're just adding another person into your life.
That's a really good point, Ron. Okay, Vicki, what does Christmas look like now?
Oh, it's full of joy. I really look forward to it. But, you know, we've done a lot of life in the 12 years we've been married. We've done a lot of life with the kids together now. And so I guess a good word that I would say is there's unity. I feel like that there's unity. Like now with my daughters, it's just always Bob and Vicki. You know.
That's really neat.
Me and Bob, and I think it's the same with Bob's kids.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of inclusive. Yeah, they're inclusive now.
That's great. One of the messages we give blended families all the time is it takes time. And you can get there. You do have to keep going and keep pressing in. If somebody's listening right now, I'll just this is an open-ended question to anybody. If somebody's listening right now and they're still in the hard and they're going, I don't know. They did it. But there's some early adopters in a lot of blended families. There's some slow adopters in a lot of blended families. What advice would you give people if they've got a slow adopter?
I think I have this one. Time's your friend. You just referenced it. It takes time, number one. Number two, it will work. Just keep after it. Keep doing the right thing. Time is your friend. Keep your marriage healthy. But we got there by just keeping on and keeping on. And that's the secret sauce, is to give it time. And then invest in, Vicki mentioned we created unity. That's by doing life correctly with your kids.
That's really good. But I can't help but question this time thing. When we're talking about time and we're saying just give it time, are we talking about months? Are we talking about years? I mean, what do we need to be thinking about there?
Sometimes you have to move on and keep pressing forward with those that you have on board. And you have to just keep pressing forward. And then you have to hope that the others will come along and join you when it's right for them.
Now, that's just a clip from our 5-year update. If you'd like to hear that entire conversation, the show notes will tell you how you can download that edition of Family Life this week. Next time, we'll hear from Stephanie Holmes about blended families with an autistic child.
You've got to increase your understanding of autism, because if in your brain you keep saying this is a behavior issue, this is a discipline issue, this is unfair, you are not going to do things with the right intention.
That's therapist Stephanie Holmes next time on Family Life Blended. Merry Christmas. No matter what kind of stress your family experiences this week, may you be reminded of the Savior's love and invitation to be part of His kingdom. Born into a stepfamily, the Messiah changed everything for us. Hold on to hope and trust Him, for He is able. I'm Ron Deal. Thanks for listening. And thanks to our Family Life Legacy partners for making this podcast possible. If this podcast has helped you at all at any point in time, would you make a year-end tax-deductible gift specifically for Family Life Blended? Maybe a little gold, a little frankincense, or myrrh, maybe a little figgy pudding. Just go to familylife.com/blendedpodcast and click the donate button. Our chief audio engineer is Keith Lynch, Bruce Goff, our producer. Our mastering engineer is Justin Adams, and theme music provided by Braden Deal. Family Life Blended is produced by FamilyLife and is part of the Family Life Podcast Network.